Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. So, Joel, we were talking before we got started. Jen came up with this idea of having us talk about divine encounters. And as the music was playing, I realized, well, literally everything's a divine encounter. So why don't we just drop the first part? That we already kind of agreed on that. We like the second part, the encounters part.
Absolutely.
Because we could probably do 4 or 5 shows on that one. We'll do one.
And incorporated in that because everyday encounters, the synchronicity of life, the law of attraction. You never know who you're going to meet, or what they do, what role they play in your life. The old saying, season, reason, or lifetime. You never know, and
that's right.
And that's one of the more fascinating things. So over the years, I've had so many encounters with different people and different situations that I just sort of embrace those, and I never know because obviously the majority of the time I never know why the encounters happen, but I believe encounters happen for a reason. And I just have met some of the coolest people just randomly, and you encounter people, and I always look for wisdom. It's funny you say that because the other day I was having lunch, and I had lunch with a friend. He's a doctor. He had to leave an emergency, and I was just sitting there. So I'm sitting there, and there's an older gentleman. I mean, really old, sitting next to me. Okay. And he was sitting there, and he goes, "I heard you two talking." I go, "Yes, sir." And he goes, so I'm thinking, I didn't know what he was talking about. And we were talking about addiction and relapse. That's what we were talking about. Mm-hmm. And so he said, "I've been in recovery for a long," I said, "Congratulations, like 50 years, some crazy number." And I said, "Congratulations." And so I'm really just trying to eat. And sure. he keeps wanting to talk. And so 5 or 6 minutes goes by, and he goes, "I'm not going to fall in the Grand Canyon today."
Well, good to hear that.
And I said, and I remember hearing this later, but so I didn't really get the connection. I go, "Beg your pardon?" He goes, "I'm not going to fall in the Grand Canyon today." I said, "I'm really happy about that." And
absolutely.
He goes, "You know why?" I go, "No, sir, I don't." He goes, "Because I'm not at the damn Grand Canyon."
Okay.
And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "Well, you were talking earlier about relapse. The best way to stay away from relapse is not get on the edge of relapse. Don't go places. Don't be around." And we ended up having a really good conversation about those concepts. But it was this weird encounter that and at first I was just trying to dismiss him, but we ended up talking for 25 minutes. It was great. And,
wow.
And I really enjoyed talking to him. Really smart guy. He told me about his family. He was in one of the wars or something, and I think Vietnam. And he had such a unique view of the world, but he comes across when you first met him as almost crazy, but it turns out he was anything but that, Right. And so I always like when you have these encounters, you meet people in life and along the way, just sort of, you never know what somebody brings. You have chance encounters that create, great partnerships. They create relationships. One of the things that, and I don't literally do, but there's people that have come along in my life. I don't do this with everybody that comes along, but you never know, as I said, how long somebody's going to be in your life. It might be that day. It might be forever. The people you might think are going to be there forever are going to go or leave or die or something. There's always going to be these things. So that with the encounters comes, wow, what does this mean? Could this be something? Most likely it might not, but there's always that possibility. That's why I'm fascinated by it.
Well, actually, you and I are a perfect example of that because I started this podcast in 2012.
Right.
You were my 12th episode that year.
Right.
First 12 episodes, you were number 12. And I know we both had a good time. We had a good connection, but we just kind of left it there. I mean, what else was there to do? We did the show. We did what we said we were going to do.
Yes.
It wasn't until almost a year later that I got the bug to not only continue the podcast, but I wanted to have somebody as a regular co-host just because it's easier than trying to find guests all the time.
Right.
Especially when you have a brand new podcast, nobody knows who you are. It's a whole lot easier to have a co-host than to have guests.
Yes.
And I said, well, who would I want as my co-host? And I actually started with my brother and sister-in-law, but they kind of lost interest fairly quickly. And then I thought of you. And so we reconnected off of that. Now, there's an example of how an encounter turned into something unexpected, because I can guarantee I never anticipated that was going to happen. I'm pretty sure you never thought that.
No, and again, when you look at the encounter and the timing of the encounter, because when you interviewed me, I was working at a treatment center, and the reason you were interviewing me is I used the law of attraction in working with our clients, and that was actually on our website. That's how you found it.
And that was really a big thing at that point in time. At that point in time, law of attraction, that was considered woo-woo at that point.
Yeah.
Right now, it's like every day, but then that was scary stuff.
Yeah, and so we, I had it on our website even, and you found that. So, we started talking, and then with that one time, and then between our first talk and our second talk, or we reached out. I had left that company. Mm-hmm. And was going in private practice, and there's a lot of things going on in my life, and we were able to connect and get going.
Yeah.
And it started just with one initial thing, and while I certainly, like I said, I really enjoyed the first one, but I didn't ever expect it to turn into our longtime friendship now.
That would have been the last thing on my mind. Yep. I'll even tell you honestly, later on, when I made the decision to try to reach out to you again, a part of me said, he'll never do it.
Well, I always enjoyed it. And
but it points to these encounter things. I mean, because literally we'd had that one quick encounter, and I had talked myself for a moment out of the idea that it could actually go anywhere.
Yeah,
because that's the way we normally experience these things. So when an encounter turns into something, it's a thing.
Well, and it works in all directions. When you meet somebody and you really feel like, wow, this is a deep connection. Those can go sideways too.
Absolutely.
And so I mean, that's the whole point of it. So encounters and connections and synchronicity, those are all entwined in the stuff that we believe. So I never, first of all, I don't dismiss people, but I don't dismiss encounters. Most, as I said, most of them just don't ever go anywhere. I'll meet with a lot of clients for the first time, and I don't receive follow-ups. They don't want to make another appointment, and sometimes they come back years later, said I wasn't ready, but I really enjoyed our first session. Sometimes I never hear from them again. Right. It doesn't matter, because I enjoy all of them. Some of, I have clients that, have been around for years. They won't leave. They just enjoy the thing. So it's relationships and friendships. There's people that, and I think we all have this, there's people I've had in my life that I just assumed we're going to be friends forever. We were just, so, and then randomly stuff happens. You're like, how did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. And when that random stuff happens, it throws you.
Yes, it really does. And so for me, I have always been fascinated with connections in general. And as we know, the law of attraction, we attract what we're feeling and what we're, what we're bringing to the table, the energy we're bringing to the table. And so that makes the connections even more interesting. So, the idea that you meet people and you have this connection, is like, okay, so how did I bring this person? And I never ask people this because they'll think I'm absolutely crazy, but like, what is it about this person that I'm attracting to me? What is it? What's there? If I'm in a grocery store, I'm in gym clothes today. I'm totally in gym clothes. No, nobody knows who I am. People stand in line and tell me their problems. They just start talking about what's going on. How you doing? Well, my boyfriend left yesterday. I don't know, and I'm like, so they don't know who I am.
Somehow they've got you tabbed for having the therapist hat on. I mean, if they're doing that.
Yeah. But that energy connection, whatever that is, I'm, as you know, I'm very much, I love children, advocate for children. And I've been places and, little kids have run across the room I've never known and stuck their arms up for me to pick them up. And
that's a feeling.
Yeah. And I'm looking for their mom, like, boy, I'm not doing anything here.
Right.
But it's there. So we do attract. So when we're making these connections, I'm really interested in what was the attracting energy at that time.
And the thing that interests me about those, because I feel very much the same way, the thing that interests me about those connections is that feeling of attraction, because that's really what you were just describing. There's a feeling associated with it. It took me quite some time to come to terms with the idea that that feeling actually is very consistent with the experience.
Yes,
For the longest time, I didn't trust that, but I've gotten to the point now where I trust it. And I love that because that means before the whole encounter really plays out, I have a pretty good idea of how it's going to go.
absolutely.
And that was not the case years ago, but it is now. There's a lot of comfort in that. And there's a lot of security in it because, well, first of all, it means that if I encounter somebody that doesn't feel right, I know to make an exit quickly or do whatever it
Absolutely.
takes to just, create distance. And so I just don't encounter many situations anymore that are confrontational. In fact, I'm stretching my mind trying to remember when the last one was, and I I don't think I can remember what it was. Probably back, when my divorce was happening. It's probably the last time something like that happened. And even then, it was kind of a minor encounter in terms of how we encountered each other. So, when was the last time I had a real strong emotional encounter? I don't know. I can't. I mean, it's been a long time, and I'm not saying that to brag or anything. I'm saying that because when you go through life and you're learning things and you're encountering people and you're learning from each one of those encounters, it basically gets you to the point eventually where those encounters kind of add up. They kind of turn into, oh, I guess categories of experience, if you will. They turn into, I know this kind of experience, I know that kind of experience, I know how to deal with it. And not only is there a comfort in that, there's a lovely, delicious anticipation that goes along with it. Because when you get one of those really good encounters, like you can just taste it, and you can't wait to see what happens next.
Well, yeah, and when you have over the years, I can think of encounters that were life changing, and that didn't even really intend. When I the long story, I won't get into the whole thing, but when everything fell apart for me many years ago, I had nowhere to go. I was homeless, lost my job. At some point, I was going to be facing felony. I had nowhere to go. My family
Right.
was done with me, had no money. And I reached out to a gambling hotline, and I didn't know what they were going to tell me. It's like, what are they going to tell me? Go to Gamblers Anonymous? Good idea, but I'm homeless. And so I told the guy, he actually listened to me. He knew this guy that had a house on Anna Maria Island, and he worked with gamblers. And he said, I said, but I don't have any money. Who would even consider that? And he goes, he'll let you get a job and work it off. Most gamblers don't have money. And so I went there with just looking for a place maybe to hang out for a week or two till I figured out what my next thing is. And that turned out to be my eventual business partner, Rick, and lifetime friend.
Wow.
And that one encounter was the foundation for everything that I have today. And it was just, the chain of events, as I've always said. That guy, I heard when I got in my car, and the reason I got the gambler, the contact's name of the gambler helpline, is I was listening to sports radio and they were interviewing this guy about sports betting. So I didn't even know that was a thing. So at the right moment in the car, it's just all those chance synchronicities and encounters. They fascinate me because without them, there's my story. I don't know what happens if all those didn't happen.
Yeah. Well, actually, the way you've told a story in the past tells me that it couldn't have happened any other way because
Yeah.
you've described many times how it was a series of events and encounters where there was literally only one possibility. There were no options.
Well, and so even and I usually don't even get to this part of the story because it's, there's so many other ones, but just the contact with that guy. So imagine I get in my car, I have nowhere to go. I literally just got fired, and they said the police will be in contact with you.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I have no home, and so I'm in my car. My radio happens to be on sports radio.
Okay.
And they're interviewing this guy, and I said, well, and he had an 800 number at the time that mattered because I had no money and I had to go to a payphone and call the 800 number.
Right. Yeah.
And it was, so that led to that. So what are the odds of me getting in my car at that exact moment after getting fired and this guy's talking on the radio live?
Yeah, well, that's law of attraction. That's what you're basically pointing at there.
Exactly. So but when you look at all that, and that's why, and everybody, I don't want to present my life as having any more encounters. Mine are just so blaring and obvious. They're right there. But I believe everyone, life has a lot of different twists and turns, and who you meet, and who you make choices to go, and all these other things. And it's amazing. And then you end up in this place, and it's like I have the, I can't imagine having a better life than I have now. I love my life. I'm in great health. I got all this good stuff going, and I have a lot of encounters now, but they're not so consequential because I don't need them to be consequential, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. And you're also reminding me of something else. You're reminding me that encounters can be received by us in different ways. I can remember a time where the idea of encountering somebody new would have actually been frightening.
Yeah.
That the whole idea of dealing with somebody new usually would mean, in my mind, that there are going to be all kinds of crazy consequences that came out of it, and none of it was going to end well, and it's going to, in some way, it's going to come splashing back on me in some really bad way. That's where my mindset was at that point in time. Now, since then, my mindset, I've been able to shift dramatically, and so now encounters are exciting, they're fun, they're interesting, but it really illustrates. It really, not only does it come down to how you're going to receive them, but how your experience is going to be dramatically different because of how you're going to receive them. I mean,
Absolutely.
not small differences. We're talking major differences.
I agree. And that's there's been some things that get on the edge sometimes of some encounters almost appear to be miraculous. I think, they're so big, but I think every encounter is miraculous on some level. This has been a couple of years ago. I'm at Publix, where in the neighborhood I used to live at, and so I'm in line, and I forget if they self-checkout was busy, so I was waiting in line. So this mom, her son, and her grandmother, is the kid's grandmother, her mom, were there, and she was very frustrated with her son, and they're trying to find. I'm hearing this, and she said, there's a 6 months wait list to get in to see any counselors or therapists, and I'm hearing this story, and and so I said, here's my card, give me a call. And she looked at me and she said, well, I've heard your name before, but I heard you don't take insurance. And I said, just give me a call. And I talked to her, and I saw the kid for a while until we got him into a therapist that her insurance covered.
Okay.
And so she was freaked. She said, so you just overheard us. You happen to be in line. And I said, no, the biggest craziness and all that sounds impressive. That I had a business card in my wallet was the biggest thing, because I never carry those.
So that was the unique occurrence, that you actually carried a business card.
Yeah, I go to events and never remember to bring my business card. So I had one in my wallet. So, but just that idea. And I'm not trying to be the hero of the story. I'm just saying I was able to fill that bridge. And then once I started asking friends who, look, I need you to make a space for this kid. I'm seeing him until you can see him. And it really helped the kid. The kid's doing great, all that. He stays in touch occasionally. But that at a grocery store, that was a connection. And also, I mean, I allowed that connection to happen too.
Sure.
Because I didn't have to say anything. They didn't know who I was.
No, of course. Yeah. But the point is that you were accepting of that encounter, and it turned into this really marvelous series of events.
Yeah.
So that's really that to me, that's the biggest challenge, is learning to be accepting of whatever the encounter is, and recognizing that through that acceptance, amazing things happen. I'll tell you a story. I was telling you before we got going. I met somebody yesterday. I'm getting more into being a musician, and I got together with this one woman who's a singer so we could do some jamming together. And then afterwards, she's telling me all these stories about these famous musicians that she had encountered in her life. And I was sharing some of those with you. Well, one of the things that she was telling me about is about a pet who had, I forget the exact story, but there was a pet that was associated with this musician, and yada, yada, yada. And it made me think of my cat. Now, as you know, my cat passed away a couple months ago. And I have a picture of him up on my bookcase, and it's one of my most prized possessions, because it's a picture of him basically just sitting on my shoulder, not asleep, but just kind of resting on my shoulder. And it occurred right after he'd been attacked, and we'd taken him in to get the surgery on an abscess, and he basically had survived a really traumatic event. And for the first time and only time in his life, he was perched on my shoulder, and I got Louise to take a picture of it. So after he passed, that became one of my most prized possessions. And I was telling the story to her, showing her the picture and so forth. She's, oh, he's so cute, and so forth. Well, That's an example of an encounter.
Yes.
And not only is it an encounter, it's an encounter with a very particular time that I could never have predicted happening.
Yes.
Because like I said, he had never done it before. He'd never done it since. It was the only time that ever happened. Fortunately, Louise had her phone right there so she could take an immediate picture. That encounter turned into really a photo that has helped me get past his passing. Because that's why I have a big 8x10 of it, because I want to have that right in my face every day. I have same reason I have him on my phone. He's my wallpaper on my phone.
Yes.
A really happy picture of him. It's those little encounters that's why photos are so big to people. That's why pictures are so important to people.
Yes.
They remind us of the most important encounters in our families, in our lives. Those encounters, and how do you predict those encounters in advance? Well, you really can't. You have to be ready for them, but you can't really predict them.
Yeah, one of the things, and I don't like to use regret that much, but it's one of the things that I wish I'd have done something a little different. My son TJ absolutely got pissed off when I took his picture. He did not want his picture taken. He just, adolescent boys don't like that. And it was also a time where your phone camera was not really a phone camera.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like we're walking around with a high def camera in our hands.
Right.
So I don't have near the pictures of him. Now the pictures I have are precious and will always, they're very valuable, but I wish I had an 800 times that, I wish I had many more. And so in today's world, I tell all my friends, screw what the kid wants, take his picture, even the grumpy pictures, do that. You never know. Those pictures become, your picture with your cat becomes very valuable. My few pictures I have of TJ are very valuable. And because he's in my brain, but when you can actually see the physical picture, it's such a amazing feeling. So you never know. That's the beauty of life and the tragedy of life all at the same time. You just don't know. We can tonight, and I'm not being great things can happen or terrible things can happen. That's what life is, and you never know the last time you'll see somebody.
That's right.
And make sure that energy is set correctly. Make sure that energy is set the way it should be. I just love the idea that we're all interconnected, and those connections, they sometimes I think, man, that was pre-planned on some level. It seems that way.
And when we've been talking about losses. You lost TJ, I lost my cat. I'm sure all of our listeners have had losses of that kind of one time or another in their lives. When you experience losses like that, one of the things I found that they really do for me, and I'm pretty sure that it pretty much happens to everybody, but I'm not going to say everybody because it's always dangerous to say everybody. But I think what happens is when we have things like that, it really cements in our mind how valuable it is to appreciate the encounter in the moment, no matter what it is.
Yes.
After you've had a loss, you really appreciate that. You really know that more than anything, more than you ever knew it before, simply because you've been through the loss. The loss reminds you everything is precious. Everything is valuable. Everything is to be appreciated.
Absolutely. And that's the lesson of the mixing in sort of this, basic, not just law of attraction and the energy and all that, but also the power of now. The moment of now is anything relevant is happening right now, and enjoying it, appreciating it. Those that are in your orbit, I work really hard on, I lost, what I thought was a relatively close friendship within the last year, and didn't really understand a lot what happened, and I've got to piece together for me. It doesn't matter, right? But it's easy to be angry. I feel that it's like that I lost that friendship unfairly. I didn't even know what was happening. But I can also appreciate the incredible times I had in that friendship, and that happened. So I don't let the latter part, I don't let that as much as I can. It's not an active thought in my brain. Right. I can either focus on how I feel about just the bizarre way that friendship ended, or I can focus on the 7 years before that of really fun, great times that I remember that friendship.
Yeah.
And so I get to put my energy in that. As angry as I could get if I allowed myself, I'm also very happy of the times we spent together. So it's, life has that way of happening. And there's at a point where you're like, for a while you're saying, well, what happened? I need to understand. And at some point say, okay, it doesn't matter. Let's just focus on what was good and let's accept the move on, so to speak.
And there's really nothing wrong with spending time wondering about what happened.
Right.
But you're well advised to realize that the sooner you get off that, the better you're going to feel sooner.
And I once there, the brain, my brain in particular is an investigative brain. So if something happens, it isn't even, I just need to know the chain of events. And I think I've shared this, my son Justin, or, my son Chris, or, TJ really never lied much, but I always tell my kid, don't lie, not because it's wrong. My brain will figure out the lie, and then I start asking a million questions, the inconsistencies. Just tell me the truth. I'm never mad at the truth, but the lies waste a lot of time in my brain. So when I have something like that happens, it isn't, the idea like I got to let go of the investigation. Either one day I'll find it out, or I won't. But I'm not going to spend, a little bit of that's fine. But I'm very much, I got to turn the page, because that's not productive for the most part.
What you're really pointing to is another way of understanding just how valuable encounters are.
Yes.
Because like we were saying, I mean, we don't really know what's going to happen with any given encounter until after we've had it, and then some time has played out so we can see how reality frames it. And a lot of encounters, they don't seem to turn into much of anything, that's just part of the process.
Yes.
But nevertheless, the more that we learn to appreciate every encounter, my goodness, this would be my advice to anybody who wants to understand how to apply the law of attraction. It's not something we talk about much anymore, but we used to talk about that a lot. How do you apply the law of attraction to get what you want in your life? Best thing I know of at this point is to appreciate every encounter, no matter what it is.
I wish we had a 50 cents, not even $1, for every hour we try to figure out how to do the law of attraction. Did we make it the most complicated process in the world?
Oh yeah. Oh, we're experts at that.
Yeah. It's really that simple. Our problem was we instinctively knew it was that simple, but it was too simple.
In a sense, yeah, it really was too simple.
Yeah.
Well, that's human nature, though. I mean, humans love to complicate simple things.
Yeah. No, and you're right. It's really just the appreciation of every encounter, every connection, everything that goes on, and just sort of living in that gratitude of what is right. I do if I ever have a dip in my emotions, I can quickly just say, wait a minute, let's look at what's right in my life. Does that make any sense? And they don't last any time at all anymore. I can just instantly do that, and they very seldom, I'm not suggesting that even happens much, but the idea that I know how in control I am over what I'm attracting by my emotional feelings, how I'm feeling, and within that moment, and when I'm not feeling the right way, or using our version of the emotional guidance scale, when I'm not, my goal is to simply be grateful. I have it, how am I feeling? I don't even need to really identify it. I just want to get grateful, be appreciated.
In other words, don't even wait to figure out what you're currently feeling. Just go for the gratitude. Right.
Yeah, gratitude for me, and I can only speak for me. Gratitude is my immediate. If I go through, I can in my mind go through 5 things in my brain, 10 things that are going great in my life. That's all I need. Just a reminder. I'm in great health. I have everything that I've ever wanted to have now. I have it right now. I could go anywhere in the world. I can do whatever I want to do, and that's available to me right now. And so anything that isn't matching that, I need to move away from it.
What a great way to approach things too. Because if you're going to pick one reaction to be a default reaction, why not gratitude? That's a good one. That's my vibe.
Yeah, and for me, it's hard. One of my friends at the gym, she lost both of her legs and one of her arms in a bad car wreck, and so she's in the gym all the time. She for her to get to the gym, this is a lot of work. She has to get in her van. That big arm has to pick her up, and there's a 20-minute event for her to get in the gym. Mm-hmm. So many years ago, it's a Monday night. Get to the gym. My workout partner texts me and said he can't make it. I said, I'm tired. I'm going to go to the house. And so I'm in the car, and when I'm about to crank up my car, her van pulls up.
Okay.
So here, this woman, I watched the arm come up. I watched this 15-minute process of her getting out. And I went, what the hell am I thinking? What? I am. I got my gym bag, went inside, I opened the door for her, and I told her the story. I said, she said, well, maybe you need the night off. And I go, do you need the night off? She goes, no. I said, I don't need the night off. and she laughs about it all the time because I was not going to go work out till I realized, wait a minute, if I'm feeling tired or I'm feeling, no, I'm not. I wasn't, had a great workout. But your brain can deceive you sometimes. So you got to look at the reality. Sometimes it can be comparing and contrasting to, not comparison of like the thief of joy comparison, but just like, I'm complaining about that.
And what you're talking about is taking advantage of an encounter to remind you of things that you need to remind yourself of.
Absolutely.
Because when you do that, what you're really doing is you're finding a new way to express gratitude in that moment. That's a form of gratitude.
Yes. I have a client who has a brand new, super fancy car. I don't even remember what it was. And so this is like a $300,000 car. And so he texted me the other day and he goes, I'm pissed. I go, okay, I can't wait to hear. This isn't a client, it's a friend. So I can't wait to hear what this is. He goes, my heated steering wheel quit working.
Yeah, that'll kill your day. Yeah.
I go, oh my God, really? Of course, you know me. I said, is there anything I can do? Can I come over? Do I need to bring some hand warmers? I said, it's going to get all the way down this morning to 78. Are you going to be able to be okay with an unheated? And so I'm relentlessly bugging him all day about, did your hands get frostbite this morning? And he just said, you're an asshole. I said, of course I am. I said, bro, really? He goes, and he said, not the funny thing, but the thing that makes it even worse, it wasn't even broken. I just hit the wrong button.
Hit the wrong button.
Okay. But you'll so when people, we have a tendency to, if I look at the worst days of my life, what I will label as the worst days of my life, I have this checklist and I don't have to use this one often, but it's sort of the ultimate, I'm at the bottom kind of thing. What am I going to do?
Right.
Today, I didn't eat out of a trash can. Today, I didn't sleep in a flower bed. Today, I'm not in jail. Today, my son did not die.
Right.
Those are all things that happened to me, and they didn't happen today.
Yeah. And I noticed that every single one of those came out of previous encounters you had in your life.
Yes. So,
right.
Yeah, you can, but that's the value of, encounters even go further because understanding encounters, like me telling the story about eating out of a trash can. It's not a great story, but it's a story that has relevance for another encounter I was going to have in my life later with my son TJ. It was just so all of this is connected. That's the connection piece for me. So the encounters, whether we ever see all the connections, I feel all the connections are somehow connected.
Jen picked the title Divine Encounters, and I commented at the beginning that all encounters are divine. I'm hearing that in every single one of these little stories we're sharing. The one you just shared. You actually just identified 4 stories very quickly in a row. Every one of those was divine.
Yeah, well,
and I'm not saying they were desirable. No, they weren't all desirable. I'm just saying they were divine. They were.
No, the eating out of the dumpster is one of the worst days of my life.
Yeah,
until it became one of the best days of my life because of an event that happened to change my perspective of that.
Right. Exactly.
So
it raises an interesting question. A lot of people would stumble on that. They'd say, "Well, that's not a divine encounter." My response would be, "Well, then what is a divine encounter?"
Well, every encounter is divine, as you're saying. Yeah. If you allow them to be. Now, see, now we can get into some perspectives, law of attraction, or basically some stoicism, because the most basic Stoic principle exists that you can't control what happens, but you can control your reaction to what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's, if you ever want to just define Stoicism, that's the thing. There's a
Okay.
lot of subshoots of that. There's a lot of concepts under that, but that's the basic. You are in control of your response, of your mindset. You're in control of those things. Terrible things can happen. So before we got on the show, and I was waiting for you to sign on. I was, as I'm always doing, talking to Chat GPT about Viktor Frankl,
Oh yeah.
or other concepts. So Viktor Frankl was a famous psychiatrist. He was a part of the Nazi death camps, and he watched many. I mean, as a child, if you don't know who Viktor Frankl is, please look him up. One of the most amazing stories, and his mindset was basically stoicism on some level in the most darkest context, in the most vile times. And he describes people going to an ungodly ending, and some people just stood up, straightened their tie, walked straight on in, and just some people accepted it, but he wasn't saying one was right or one was wrong, but your perspective is going to dictate how you experience things. And so the idea that all of this being entwined, every event is a lesson, or it's moving you toward. I don't like lessons so much, but it's something there's a reason for it, and sometimes they're ungodly events that make you stronger. If most of the famous gigantic companies in the world came to be after the founder screwed up somewhere else, or got fired somewhere else, or had something, and I know there's exceptions. I don't need all the emails of those exceptions, but there's people that will say, wow, he got lucky. No, he took something and he changed it. The idea that, I don't know how many people I know have lost jobs and I'm one of them, that I thought was my retirement job, that I unexpectedly lost a job, but my mindset was so good and ready because I was prepared for it. And, I knew something was going to be better. I got into a much better situation. That was, 2012, I think, or 13, whenever all that happened. What an incredible movement forward I've made, from that. I couldn't imagine staying in that job any longer. So even when I lost the job, I wasn't super excited about it, but I had no doubt I didn't know what it would look like. But man, it worked out well. And that's so knowing that this process takes place, and the people that come along, the people that you have no idea what they bring to the table, it's such a great way to live. Just loving every encounter, seeing, imagine what it is, every connection. But if you allow it, even the worst things that happen have something that can move you forward if you allow it.
And when you were talking about how we have the choice of how we're going to respond, it reminded me that, well, first of all, it reminded me of a time not so long ago when I didn't think that was possible. I mean, I literally did not think you could actually choose your response. I thought, especially with severe events, there was just a default response, and that's the only thing you could possibly do. And the first time that it was presented to me that you could actually choose your response, I literally laughed out loud. I said, that's absolute bullshit. That's really what my reaction was. Like, that can't possibly be. Once I started to shift over, and it took me a while. I mean, you were part of that. You know what that period was like. It took me a while to shift over, but once I shifted over to it, it was astonishing to me how, just by making that shift in my thought process, that I could actually choose a different response, how my encounters changed. Because my encounters now became about, here's a new opportunity to shift your behavior, to shift your response, to shift how you're going to handle this thing, rather than doing it the way you always used to. It wasn't easy at first. It never is. But as time went on, it got easier and easier, because I kept doing it more and more. I kept trying to do it. I kept trying to apply it. And then it finally gets to the point where not only is it easy, you actually kind of look forward to it.
Yeah.
Like, not only is this not bad, damn, this is actually pretty good.
Yeah. And that's the, within all of that, when we have that, when you realize you are in control of your perspective and your response. So no matter what happens, you're in control of that. And then this is my epiphany years ago. So then you take that, then you realize your reality is dictated by your perspective and your response. And so literally you're in charge of your reality when you put all that together. You're a reality creator. And now, does it always create like you want? No, but you can adjust that the law of attraction, that energy allows that. So it is most people don't get what they want. I nothing that I have is even what I realized I wanted. It's like, thank God I didn't get what I want. Because I'm much happier with what I have today. I didn't even know this version was possible. So, the idea that I have, like, wow, this is great. I didn't even know it was there. So some people say you can't get what you want, but I'm really glad I didn't.
And to be perfectly fair, I mean, over time we do learn how to go what we want this way through changing our response. It's just like learning any new skill.
Yes.
What former co-host Sydney Chavez used to make this point. Anybody can learn how to draw. And I said, how do you do that? She says, it's real simple. You get a pad of paper with 365 pages in it, and every day you draw something on a separate piece of paper in the pad. And if you do that every single day, no matter how bad it is, you just make sure you stick to it every single day. Within a year, you're going to know how to draw.
Yeah.
That's how you build the skill. Well, the same thing is going to be true with choosing responses. You're going to be really bad at it at first. I mean, I'm probably like the world's worst drawer. And that probably is true for many people, probably most people. But you do it over time, you get better at it. And the same thing is true for responses. You're really bad at choosing different responses at first. But if you keep trying it, keep trying, you get good at it. And when you get good at it, I mean, I look at what happened to your life after you start accepting all these. I mean, your life turned into like an amazing run. And I'm willing to bet that was in part because you were actually able to change your response so consistently that you knew good stuff was going to come.
It got to a point where I'm in a place now, as you know, there's no effort to the law. There's nothing. It's just, it's going to, I zero doubt. It's all good. I'm on autopilot with what I want. I mean, it just shows up. It's amazing. It's really cool. You get to that place. And, all that time I thought I had to do it a certain way, realizing I just got to keep this right, then everything else gets good. The rest of it, your perspective. I was at the gym this morning, and there's a track I walk around. I usually walk 2 miles before I start working out. So normally I wear my AirPods, not to even listen to things, to keep people from talking to me.
That's a good strategy. That works.
So today I forgot my AirPods. So I said, no, so this guy, he's a former client, nice guy.
Okay.
So he's, oh my goodness, Joe, how you doing? I said, good. And so he's slow. I was walking at a slower pace than he was. And he started walking by me. And then he started telling me about how bad his shoulder surgery was, how it still hurts. Then, he had a car wreck, and his job was workman's comp, took forever. After about a quarter of a mile of him telling me absolutely everything that has gone wrong and how miserable his life is and how, the painkillers got him addicted. And, and I said, oh, well, it's great to see you, buddy. Hope all that gets better. And I just stopped walking. I just went and did something else. And I stayed away from him. Like, oh my gosh, I had to exit that energy real quick because he could deliver nothing. So it was like, well, my one of the complaints was his shoulder. He had rotator cuff surgery. He said, my shoulder hurts. It's been 3 months. I said, it takes up to 8 months for that to get better. So every day it's going to be getting better. Well, it's getting a little better, but it hurts, and I'm miserable. And I'm like, see, I would, I'm looking at it like, thank God my shoulder's healing. It's going to be well in a few months. He doesn't have that energy at all. But that's the point. You're in control of your response. You're in control of how you view things, and when you understand that, it is the gift. You are that's where the classic Stoic philosophy serves me so well. I'm grateful for Stoicism and understanding it, and I'm grateful for the law of attraction and understanding it. Those are the things that combine. I needed both of those concepts to come together for me to really make this work.
So, in the context of our conversation about encounters, it kind of leads me to a question that I already know what the answer is, but I'm going to pose it anyway because it may be a question that's still in some people's minds. And that is, have you ever had an encounter that just really wasn't worthwhile?
Well, I mean, on the surface, yes. In reality, probably no. See, I don't look at the universe doesn't waste. The connection doesn't waste. I don't know meet somebody, what effect that has down the road for them. So I'm living through my perspective. So does it matter to me? That maybe not, but I have no idea if it mattered to them. I don't know what that made a difference. You know, I have a kid, you know, the 20-something-year-old man the other day approached me at the gym, had no idea who he was. He said, "Do you remember when you taught me how to bench press in here when I was 12?"
Wow.
I do not. And he said, "You changed my life. My mom and dad were divorced, and you helped me learn how to bench press." And he's a big, strong guy now. And he said, "I always wanted to say thank you for that." That encounter meant nothing to me at the time.
At the time.
It does now.
Yeah, in a big way.
Yeah. And I don't remember him specifically, just some random 12-year-old that was probably really screwing it up. And I had to go there and, you know, correct it. But, you know, he remembered, he said, "No, every time you saw me, you did that." And he said, "You found me," one of the older teenagers came over, you told him to help me. And I don't remember any of this. And he said, I never missed a day in the gym after that because you paid attention and nobody else was in there paying attention to me.
Isn't that something, though? It's a great example of how we, like you were saying, we don't really know necessarily that it's going to be a good encounter until later on. In fact, at the time, it can seem like a bad encounter. It can seem like even a horrible encounter. That was not a horrible one. It was a forgettable one. You didn't remember it at all.
Well, I mean, it literally is a 3-minute thing. I'm showing him how to do it, and I tell one of the older kids to come over here, and all the kids in the gym were very incredible young men. And I said, he's new. You guys take him under his wing, show him what to do. They did that. I mean, but I made that connection. I did that. So I don't even remember. I've done that 50 times in my life at the gym. So that specific event, but for him to come up and tell me that. So your question, that's why I'm answering the question. To me, it didn't seem meaningful at all at the time. It's very meaningful to me now. So that's been, 13 years ago.
And the great lesson in there is you didn't know at the time that it was going to be meaningful. You had to wait to find out, which means that's why it's so valuable to appreciate every encounter, because you never know which one's going to be the one.
And that's the beauty of it. He didn't have to come up to me, and the other day, and I'm always speaking to people in the gym, and me, that's sort of my place. And I've had people say, the lady said she almost left one day because she didn't know what to do, and I just walked her around, showed her what to do, found it. One of the trainers, I said, "Come on, guys, let's she doesn't know what she's doing. That's not her fault. It's your job to do this." And then she said, "Man, I was about to leave the gym." She said, "I've lost 62 pounds in the last year, and I was about to leave that day." And so, and I'm not trying to sound arrogant. I'm just telling things that have happened. And
I don't hear that as arrogance at all. I hear that as a wonderful story about how you gave her a little attention when she needed it, and look what she turned it into.
Well, most people that walk in, I remember the first time I walked in the gym, and here's what the model for me. I was a skinny little 13-year-old boy, and I picked this gym of these monsters. The youngest dude in there than me was 30, and it was a powerlifting. It was 100 degrees in the gym. It stunk. It was rusty, and it just these guys were monsters. So I walked in, and the guy comes up and said, "What you need, kid?" And I said, "I'm probably in the wrong place, but I'd like to start lifting weights. I'm pretty skinny." And he goes, "Well, it seems like you're the right place to me." And I said, "My mom says she'll pay the membership." And he goes, "Okay." And he said, "The only rule is you do what we tell you." And he said, just come in, do what we tell you. Don't you're not going. And I said, "I'm very weak." And he goes, he called most of the guys over, and he goes, "Who here walked in the gym who wasn't weak day one?" And said, "We all did. Same thing, buddy. We all came in here, same thing." So this group of guys, I mean, they showed me how to do it right. And I got really strong really fast, and they were really good. And so I remember what they did for me. So that encounter with them leads to my encounter, how I treat people in the gym now. Because I remember what it's like to be that I look so absurd in my mind. I look so absurd compared to those guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they were looking back on probably their own first encounter.
Well, that's what they said. I mean, I've been to, most of them have passed away. But over the years, we stayed in touch, and I've worked out with them when I'm back down in Florida. And, they say, when you walked in the gym, you were basically us. We were glad to have you. So that's why we took the time to make, if a kid walks in the gym is worried about just lifting heavy weights, they don't know how to do it properly. They showed me the perfect form. They showed me how to, what to do, where to put my feet, where to put my hand placements, and really solid people. They remembered their first time. So I remember my first time, and I hand that down. And I believe that these kids that are turning into grown men now will hand that down continuously.
Now that's exciting, because that's what we often call the ripple effect.
What it is, butterfly ripple effect is that process that you see. So I mean, not only can a connection, and this is where that divine really comes into play in my mind. It can be compounded through other people. So so you never know when being nice to someone or giving somebody a whatever, you do that, it could be a meaningless or close to meaningless event to you. But that's why I say I don't believe in meaningless things. You might not ever know, or it might be years before you find out, but it's never meaningless because there's multiple parties involved. It's not just you.
I don't know why this is coming into my mind. I'm sure it's coming in for a reason, so I'm just going to bring it out there. You referred quite innocently to what these guys were doing as being nice, and the thought that went through my mind was, no, that was actually kindness. We often use the word nice about something that's actually kindness, but kindness is a different thing from niceness. Kindness is the heart opening up, and I want to help you kind of a thing. Nice is just, oh, hi, how you doing? Kindness is that connection, that encounter being played out in a very positive and supportive way. And you were describing how these muscle-bound guys were just demonstrating huge amounts of kindness to a skinny 13-year-old boy who happened to be you, and how you also do the same thing with others who come in, because you can do the same thing for them. Those acts of kindness, that's where the ripple effect really becomes powerful. Because when you have those kinds of acts of kindness going on, the ripple effects don't just happen as ripple effects. They're ripple effects that actually accelerate. They gain momentum.
They're compounded.
They compound.
They're compounded. Yeah. And so I believe in that. So my life has been full of compounding events, compounding encounters. And I know a fraction of them. I don't know them all. I may never know them all. And, it's not because they're just, every encounter is also someone else's encounter. So I can't speak to their encounter. So again, meaningless thing to me changes the direction of the life of another person, and other people do that. I mean, very kind of one of my favorite stories is this doctor who there was a fire, and there's a newborn baby. Doctor spends hours. They had to do all this stuff, save the baby. The baby almost died. Doctor saves him. A legendary medical event. Doctor wouldn't give up. Was there for like 14 straight hours.
Wow.
Saved the baby. One day the doctor's in a car crash and trapped in his car, and the paramedic that frees him is the baby he saved.
Wow. Yeah. How do you predict that one in advance?
It's like, so those encounters, I mean, they can be gigantic like that, and it's so to find out that the baby you saved is the grown man that saved you is a pretty big deal.
It's a very big deal. Yeah. And one more reminder of why it's so important to appreciate all the encounters. Now, I will throw out there, I do know that, especially if you've not gone through a major traumatic event of some kind in your life, it's going to be harder to grasp the importance of this idea of appreciating every encounter.
Thank you for saying that, because I will tell you this. The death of my son is very traumatic, and while I don't ever want to gloss over that, I'm not selling that as a good thing. It's never going to be a good thing. My response in honor of my son, there's a lot of things that came out of that I can say it made me push harder and made me do things. But I'm not dismissing the fact. So if you have trauma and you're hearing this as me dismissing trauma or loss, I am not. That's not what we're talking about here. It is, you're not in charge of your response when it's very traumatic stuff. That's built in. There's work to do around that. So I'm not about dismissing trauma and just thinking you can respond. That is not what we're talking about. You must deal with trauma in the appropriate way with professionals, and what we're talking about is your response from a healthy state of mind.
Exactly right. Yes. And additionally, if you have not been through a major trauma yet, maybe you're relatively young and you've not had a signal kind of event like that, something that just really jumps out as like, this was life-changing.
Yes.
It's going to happen at some point. We know that, but it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
When you're in that place, that's when it's hardest to appreciate the encounters that we're experiencing.
Yes.
Here's the thing though. It's worth it to try anyway. It's
It is.
really it's hard to get that message through if you have not had something that really just threw your whole life out of whack. But even if you haven't, you can appreciate it at least on some level. You can recognize that there's at least some value somewhere in there about being appreciative about the encounters. And the reason it's such a great skill to learn as soon as possible is that when that encounter does come along where there's a trauma attached to it, it's so much easier to get through it. Yeah, you do need the support. You do need the professional help. But because you already have a history of having learned how to deal with all encounters that come along in an appreciative way, you're setting yourself up in a way that most people never do, so they can get through the trauma so much easier.
And that, I believe everything that happened has made me a lot stronger, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm at a place in my life, I'm not trying to invite trauma or whatever, but there's not, I'm pretty confident that I got whatever's coming. I've survived it all. There's a resilience and a strength that comes with that. I know at some point I'm going to die. That's not today. And we're going to just keep going. And then, as I told you, I want it to be spectacular and make the front page of the newspaper somehow.
I'm looking forward to that, actually.
I'm hopefully an explosion of some sort.
Oh, yeah, that's Joel. Okay. Yep.
And I want the headline to be, local life coach presumed dead after explosion. We cannot find his body.
Oh, the things we laugh about. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah. Well, you don't forget, you can't kill energy. So I'm about really dead, even that headline hits. So really good show that turned into a really good topic, Jen. Thanks.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you, Jen. That was a good one. I mean, we were a little bit confused at first when we saw divine encounters, but then we saw the encounters part and we said, oh yeah, that does actually work. And boy, we made that work. Really good. So thank you very much. Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.